Grand Theft Auto 4 is a tough game to talk about. It's a very polarizing game for me because as much as I love the game, I kinda don't like playing it. It's such a well-realized world with so many deep and interesting characters, a difficult yet satisfying physics engine, an incredibly detailed and viscerally engaging system of gameplay where every single thing they included has so much polish it practically has a mirror shine. But it's also a game that goes on for way too long because they put so much detail into individual aspects of design that they couldn't include a ton of different mechanics, so there's very little vehicle or mission variety. And the game simply doesn't have enough variety to carry a 30-hour length. But the world of Grand Theft Auto 4 really is a world I love to immerse myself in every now and again. I almost feel like this game has become underrated in the grandness of time. It was considered one of the greatest games of all time when it first came out, but it's getting up there in age, and ever since 2008, the gaming industry has exponentially exploded. Back when this game was new, you had maybe a couple dozen games that could be considered contenders for greatest of all time. But over time, the popularity of gaming and the ease of which you can make games improved to the point where possible contenders for greatest games of all time increased exponentially. I remember a time when Braid was held up as one of the greatest games of all time. When's the last time you even heard somebody talk about it? So this left certain classics of their day behind, and that's sad because I feel like Grand Theft Auto 4 still achieves a level of visceral realism that has been pretty much unmatched ever since. The world they realized has no equal, and as a result, I believe the main character, Niko Bellic, is perhaps one of the most well-realized characters in the history of gaming.
You're dead like sit up the ass.
30 hours is a long time to get to know a character, and I feel like in that time, they make him into one of the most profound, compelling, and deep characters in the history of gaming. Definitely the best character that Rockstar Games has ever made, with the possible exception of Arthur Morgan. To be clear about something, suffering doesn't inherently make a good character, because suffering in itself is nothing more than a plot device to give a character an opportunity to grow. But it's only done well if used well. To take a completely random example, Jade from Beyond Good and Evil never suffered significantly, but she's a great character nonetheless. Famously, I would say. On the opposite side of the same coin you have, well, pretty much every character that David Cage has ever written. Because David Cage is not a good writer and seems to think that character suffering is a substitute for personality and depth. He also goes way too far, making it come across as gratuitous a lot of times. But a good writer will use suffering as a catalyst, something to springboard off of. It's certainly easier to make a character who's suffered more compelling because if you're able to be invested in a character's struggles, making them go through some trials makes you sympathize with them all the more. But you need to be able to sympathize with them at all. There's no one formula to make a compelling character. It's a very hard and nuanced thing to get down. But I would say the thing that makes a character compelling above all else has to do with their decisions. A character's decisions will ultimately drive their personality and give you something to attach to. Hence why it's hard to make a reactive character compelling, because it's hard to display personality when you have no control over what's happening. The things you choose to do are what gives you layers. It gives you a place to stand, and the reasons for doing what you choose to do is ultimately what informs your personality and vice versa. And that's the thing about Niko, he's a doer. There are plenty of times when he blindly goes along with whatever weird crap his cousin or his friends are getting into, but the story is still driven by the things he decides to do. Because even when blindly following orders of someone else, he still has a reason for doing so. He doesn't just do missions for mission's sake. It's all in aid of his larger goals.
Why do all this work? Because I need the money. And because I can't do anything else. And because I'm good at it. Sure.
When you're playing through GTA 4, it's easy to overlook or even outright forget Niko's personal history because you don't see it. A lot of it is explained to you retroactively. The ability to overlook his past is especially the case if you played this game when you were younger. The first time I experienced this game was when I was backseating it with my sister when I was maybe 12 or 13. Meanwhile, I played it for the first time at the age of 16 or so. And I'd actually forgotten the entirety of Niko's backstory by the next time I played the game, and some of his backstory is completely easily missable because it's explored in optional dialogues, which is a shame because he has a pretty significantly tragic backstory that informs everything about him. Born in the late 70s in Yugoslavia, Niko was born into a family of 4. Him, his mother, his alcoholic father, and his brother. You may think I'm falsely referring to Roman as his brother, and you would be wrong. Niko had a brother, but he died in the war. Which war? The Yugoslav Wars. specifically the Bosnian War, a particular series of conflicts that I'm not as familiar with as other wars, and the history of Eastern Europe tends to be incredibly depressing, so I don't envision I'll be looking it up anytime soon. Nico and several of his childhood friends from his village fought together in the war, where they saw and committed all manner of horrible things. In the end, Nico's 15-man platoon was sold out and ambushed, with Nico being one of only 3 survivors. While his cousin Roman went off to America, Nico stayed in Eastern Europe and fell into a decade of criminal enterprises as a means to survive, even spending some time in prison. Most notably, he spent a good chunk of time working for a human trafficker named Ray Bulgarin around this time. However, during one of his human smuggling runs, the ship that Nico was working on got intercepted and sank. After escaping, Nico had no choice but to relocate to America to escape Ray's influence, because Ray held Nico responsible, believing he intentionally sabotaged the mission and cost Ray a boatload of money, figuratively and literally. And that's where the game begins. This is theoretically a chance for him to get away from all his criminal dealings, but one of the key themes you can interpret from this game is that there's no such thing as happily ever after. No matter what Nico's intentions were at the beginning of the game, he will always have to answer for his sins, and try as he might, he can never truly escape the person he once was. But it also doesn't help that pretty much from the moment he steps on American soil, he gets embroiled in the criminal underworld. First of all, because Roman himself is embroiled in the criminal underworld on account of owing powerful people money. But also, Nico doesn't know any other way of life, and he doesn't really have any other way to survive. His whole thing is to survive and thrive by any means necessary, hence why he's constantly going on about how he'll basically do any job as long as it pays well.
Well, I need money. This pays. I can do it. I don't care if I live or die. And I'm looking for someone.
He acknowledges that crime is his best chance, but he also feels remorse for a lot of the things he's done both in the old country and in America. But he feels trapped in the cycle of violence he's got himself into. Of course, while his dialogue is able to express his personality quite well, I think the first thing to really paint the tableau of Nico's personality is when you have to kill Vlad. Because it's the first big decision that he makes. Up to this point, Nico had seen Roman victimized by Vlad on account of Roman owing him money, and the final straw is when Roman finds out that his girlfriend Mallory had slept with Vlad. Nico just decides, you know what, I've had enough, you've had enough, let's just kill the guy. And this is where everything kind of comes together for him, hence why this is the moment where he comes clean about his real motivation for coming to Liberty City, which we'll talk about in a moment. I would say there are 3 pillars of his personality that everything is built around. The first pillar this fully establishes is Nico's loyalty. He's the type of person who has a very hard time opening up and being able to trust people, but once he does trust you, he will be by your side through everything. Roman is obviously family, so there's an inbuilt trust and therefore an inbuilt loyalty to him that would be very hard to break. Therefore, even while Roman constantly gets on Nico's nerves, Nico is willing to do just about anything for Roman, including murder, and because Nico is such a distrusting person, it means that almost everyone who he does end up befriending is in some way an extension of his relationship with Roman. For example, he meets Packy, who's a friend of Elizabeth, who's a friend of Mallory, who is Roman's girlfriend. Due to everything he's lost, and due to all the horrible, untrustworthy people he's worked with, he believes in making people earn his trust, but holding the few good ones close. Because a lot of these people he meets may not be good people in an objective morality sense, but they give back the energy that he gives them. Despite being willing to do all the same horrible things he's willing to do, they are trustworthy people who won't stab him in the back, and in his line of work, that's a rarity. I mean, you have the ability to kill Dwayne or Playboy X, and if you suffer a stroke and for whatever reason decide to kill Dwayne, Playboy X gives you money, but he doesn't become your homie in the same way that Dwayne does, because Playboy X is a snake. He's the type of guy who you know based on your limited interaction would sell you out at a moment's notice, because for him, his ego plays second fiddle to everyone else, and he sees people as a commodity, not worth the human connection. He's not a real friend to anyone. And when it's all said and done, the people who end up being close enough friends that you can call them and hang out are oftentimes very different people from him. In no sane world would Nico be friends with all the people he's friends with. I mean, look at the motley crew he's assembled. An Irish gangbanger, an ex-con, a steroid junkie, a Rastafarian pothead. Sorry, I meant to say a Rastafarian. His friends group is basically a real-life version of a walked into a bar joke. but they all carry one distinct similarity: the fact that they treat what they do like an actual job, and they have a loose code of ethics despite their line of work. And part of their code of ethics is to respect those who respect you. It kind of reminds me of how Vlad was described at the beginning of the first Max Payne game.
Vladimir was one of those old-time bad guys with honor and morals, which made him almost one of the good guys. None of us was a saint.
Which is ironic in hindsight, but I'm sure they knew that. Then there's Bernie, the guy that Nico was about to kill under the suspicion that he was the one Nico was looking for, but shortly after the misunderstanding is sorted out, Nico ends up helping Bernie against the forces looking to harm him. He has no reason to help Bernie, and the only reason they're even in contact is because they knew each other from back home, but Nico sees Bernie as a good person worth protecting and does so without a second thought. And that's kind of Nico's whole MO for a lot of the game. He's the type of person to protect vulnerable people, even if they're not strictly speaking his friends. Probably out of a desire to prevent people from suffering the way he has. Meanwhile, he has nothing but contempt for those he describes as bullshit artists. The type of people who pretend that they're good people while simultaneously causing a lot of grief. Particularly Francis McCreary, the deputy police commissioner who preaches a lot about how he's the one keeping law and order in the city while simultaneously being responsible for a lot of corrupt back alley dealings that he has Nico deal with. You have the option to kill him or his junkie brother Derek, but in spite of the fact that the option is there, it just feels so unnatural to kill anybody but Francis, much in the same way that it feels unnatural to kill Dwayne instead of Playboy X. It feels like it's the direction the game is pointing us towards, both with the attempt at how the game makes us perceive the characters and how Nico perceives the characters.
Shit, I better get ready to act surprised. Don't miss, Nico. You might hit me.
I'll hit who I'm aiming at. Don't worry.
But despite these positive attributes, Nico is also impulsive and has a temper. Vlad is probably the biggest moment of impulsive anger in the game, but there are other instances, many of which are just small individual outbursts. One of the first things he does is have an outburst against Roman. He angrily breaks into Bernie's apartment. He flips out at Ray. He breaks a $10,000 camera at one point because Manny was being a bit annoying. And he has many individual moments of just losing his temper in small ways. This suggests that he's dealing with unresolved trauma from his past and has an angry heart boiling just below the surface, ready to come out at any time regardless of the consequences. Which means it's probably a good thing he doesn't have a wife or kids at this point. One could argue that the most impulsive and destructive thing he does out of anger would be the end of the game, where one of his options is to go after Dimitri and kill him, going behind Pegorino's back and ruining their dealings, which is another case of an impulsive decision leading to dire consequences. Thinking that killing Dimitri would lead to a happily ever after, but being oh so wrong. And we'll discuss that in a moment.
Actions have consequences. You screwed me over. Now you're paying for it. Shame that'll be the second last thing that goes into your head.
I would say the third major pillar of his characterization is his intensely driven nature. He has survived up to this point largely out of spite. He's the type of person who, once he sets his mind to something, nothing can stop him. Once he decides he's gonna try and save Roman, nothing can stop him. Once he decides he's gonna confront Bernie, nothing can stop him. Once he decides to go after the diamonds, once he decides he's gonna rob a bank, once he decides he's gonna kill a man, nothing will ever stop him. This all stems from his survival by any means necessary outlook on life. Even if it's not necessarily bringing him closer to his goals, it still helps him survive for another day, but his real goals, the things he's actively working towards, are the things that get him out of bed in the morning. The things that are giving his life meaning at this point. And the number one thing that drives him is his quest for revenge, to find the man who sold out his platoon and got 12 of his friends killed.
There were 15 of us, all boys from the village. But one of us betrayed the group. It was a setup. For money. 12 people died. 3 escaped.
It's the reason why he comes to Liberty City in the first place. He hears one of the survivors is in Liberty City somewhere and moves heaven and earth to find him. Because really, it's the only thing he's living for at this point. The single goal his entire life is structured around. It's an all-consuming force that occupies every waking moment of thought. He believes that all the pain he's gone through will be worth it if he can just get his vengeance. That maybe all his pain will finally go away. It's never outright said that he has PTSD, but you can tell he does just because of how he speaks and interacts with people. He keeps it all bottled up inside, but it does come out. He does struggle with coping. And it all stems from his experiences in the old country. Growing up the way he did and seeing all his friends die left him a shell of a man who's cold and cynical. He's able to do a lot of horrible things because his trauma has caused him to not be able to psychologically feel the value of human life anymore. He's able to disassociate and just do what needs to be done. He sees a goal in front of him, and everything in between is just collateral damage. But the fact that he has suffered so much loss is why he holds on to those he cares about so dearly. Because, like I said, the last thing he wants is for the people around him to suffer the same way he has. He's quick to anger, but has no other way to cope. Someone like him who keeps falling into the same pattern because they have no other way to survive, sometimes the only emotional catharsis you can get is to let your anger out. When he's not angry, he's mostly just depressed. So as you can see, those three characteristics all define aspects of his personality, and it all feels so legitimate. And I applaud them for how they're able to make him feel real while also bringing across so many great moments as far as his dialogue is concerned. He's not overwritten, he doesn't speak in purple prose, but he speaks very philosophically and profoundly without ever feeling pretentious. There's so many classic quotes from this game that still resonate with me to this day.
I kill and steal to scrape together a living so that my cousin can fritter it away online and pay off debts. War is where the young and stupid are tricked by the old and bitter into killing each other. After you walk into a village and you see 50 children all sitting neatly in a row against the church wall, each with their throats cut and their hands chopped off, you realize that the creature that could do this doesn't have a soul. I'm the one who survived. So this is what the dream feels like. This is the victory we longed for.
It's a fine line to walk in this instance because making something profound but not pretentious and still have it sound natural coming out of a character's mouth is difficult, but they pull it off. It's a very elegantly written game that manages to organically bring across Niko's hopes, dreams, desires, and pains in a natural way. And the thing they subtly but masterfully bring across is the idea that he doesn't actually want this life. Based on his conversations and based on his views, he obviously doesn't want to do the things he's doing. He wants to live a normal life, to get away from all the horrors that he's seen and finally find a new meaning in life. And yet the darkness in his life and in his heart follows him wherever he goes, ensuring that no matter what he does or where he goes, he is forever bound to his past and forever bound to his past and forever bound to his mistakes. It's part of what gives him his cynical outlook, his inability to get away, and the fact that he is so cynical is what makes the occasional moments of levity so earned and so cathartic for the viewers because we can see the type of person he's trying to be.
You want a beer?
No.
Good, cause I ain't fucking got none.
Very funny. Maybe if being a drunkard doesn't work out, you can be a comedian.
Fuck off.
What's your name again?
Big mouth prick.
Veracatcher. Sit down.
So you in, big guy? Or we're gonna have to kill you.
Well, since you put it that way, I mean,
Hang out with bad people doing bad things, making idiot moves?
I'm an idiot. I move.
True.
And we see he's capable of being happy if only for fleeting moments because everything inevitably comes crashing down. He's willing to joke, he's willing to banter, and he's willing to find love, but he's stuck in a cycle of self-destruction that we want more than anything to see him get out of. It's implied that killing the man he looks to kill out of revenge will be the start of the next era of his life. Maybe ending this era will relieve him of all the guilt, all the anger, and all the sadness he's ever felt. Of course, as we know, regardless of whether you get revenge or not, Niko feels equally empty either way, showing that all these years of suffering has led to nothing as he comes to terms with the meaninglessness of it all. Plus, he also has to come to terms with his own hypocrisy, confronting a man who sold out all his friends for $1,000, and yet Niko himself gets called out for the fact that he's done far worse for far less.
You killed my friends for $1,000.
How much do you charge to kill someone?
Of course, Darko here doesn't know that, but Niko does. At this point, Darko is almost a dark reflection of Niko, which is probably intentional given the name. It's literally a shortening of Dark Niko. And the fact that he does look like a far more disheveled version of Niko. And no matter what you do, there's no catharsis here. Now all Niko can do is hope to find some new meaning in life, possibly in doing something more productive and less self-destructive. Of course, as you know, I've criticized the ending decision in the past for a few reasons, mostly because I feel like regardless of which ending you choose, it feels relatively unsatisfying, because while I believe that it makes more sense that Nico would go after Dimitri as a matter of survival, one, it doesn't lead to a particularly satisfying finale because at that point you have as a final boss a far less consequential character instead of the main antagonist. And two, well, Nico is not a good guy. I do believe that he's a loyal enough person that he wouldn't betray a friend, especially a friend as powerful as Pegorino, and I still maintain he probably would have at least thought about taking the deal because he constantly goes on about needing money. He's not actually working with Dimitri because Dimitri is across town, and theoretically, Nico would forevermore be under the protection of the Pegorino family, so Nico should at least theoretically feel safe in the knowledge that he's untouchable until he's not. But if we're going back to the idea of decisions shaping one's personality, I don't think either decision fully aligns with his personality at this point. Either way, he's going back on something or someone. Which you could say is the beauty of a tough decision, but in life, you're rarely only given two options like you are here. Hence why I still fully believe at this point there should have been a third option to just walk away and let the chips fall where they may. Which I actually think would lead to a better finale. Imagine, if you will, a finale where Dimitri pulls the same stunt he does in the deal ending, but where Nico isn't there to protect Phil and Phil dies. This leads to a potential ending where both Pegorino and Dimitri are the subject of the final mission. Pegorino is pissed at Dimitri for the betrayal and at Nico for not being there to stop it. Dimitri wants to kill Nico and Pegorino because he sees them both as a threat. And Nico, of course, at this point needs to take them both out for his own self-preservation. I don't know which character would die during the wedding in this case, but surely it would lead to a similar circumstance as the other two endings. All I'm saying is I feel like walking away and still having that backfire could have an equally impactful ending in the sense of reaffirming the game's themes of how there's no such thing as happily ever after, and no matter what, Nico is forced to suffer for his sins. To where even choosing to do nothing is still a choice that leads to more suffering. But I've gone on a tangent. Ultimately, what I think it comes down to is that Nico is one of my favorite characters in fiction because everything about him feels so natural, so legitimate. He comes across as one of the most nuanced, well-realized, and honestly real-feeling characters in the history of gaming. Everything about him makes sense and leads to compelling drama, which simply makes you feel sorry for the guy in such a way that you want to see him overcome all these unfortunate circumstances he's found himself in, to be able to rise above everything he's gone through and still come out on the other side. They do a tremendous job at making you sympathize. It's to the point where it's easy to forget that this guy is not a good guy. He's done plenty of bad things in his time. He's a pretty remorseless criminal, he's kidnapped people, he's betrayed people, he killed one of the McCreary brothers and turned around and offered his condolences to them, but as is the case with a lot of fiction, you're able to internalize the fact that he's not a good person while also being invested in his character, because that's the magic of fiction, is that all these things aren't actually happening. So we can compartmentalize their negative actions so long as they're compelling in their own rights. If someone like this were real, no way in hell anyone could sympathize with them, but fiction is a magical thing where good is good and bad is justifiable. We're naturally inclined to see the characters we're playing as succeed, and being immersed in their struggles will always result in us feeling more engaged in their story than if we were passively viewing their story through another character's eyes, or if this were a movie. So as long as we like you, and can experience your story, we are willing to put up with a lot of heinous stuff. And going through Nico's struggles is some of the most compelling character work and drama I've experienced in a game, even to this day. He's a complicated man with a lot of layers. He's cynical but still has a sense of humor. He's profound without being pretentious. He's loyal to those he loves and intense to those he doesn't like. He's a good person, he's a bad person, he's a very nuanced and compelling person and is everything a good character should be. He's one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. That's all I've got. If you like this video and want to support the channel, you can leave a like, tell me what you think in the comment section, subscribe, and hit the notification icon so you're always up to date on what I'm doing. I've been the King of Snark Style right here on Tactical Bacon Productions, and I will see you next time. Stay crispy, my friends.
You